I stood amidst the opulent splendor of the grand ballroom at the Plaza Hotel, New York. The soft strains of the classical string quartet played like a velvet curtain rising on the most significant performance of my life. Crystal chandeliers glittering overhead cast a luminous glow on hundreds of familiar faces. My mother's friends, business associates, Mike's former colleagues. They all believed this was a momentous day, a promising new beginning. Only I knew it was the bitter end of a 2-year charade and the dawn of a truth that would rip through every facade. My Vera Wang silk gown, an elegant ivory, draped softly against my skin, its luxurious feel doing nothing to warm the chill in my soul. The smile I painstakingly held on my lips was perhaps the most perfect I'd ever managed, but deep within my blue eyes, an icy fire burned. I once believed in love, in sincerity, but now only sharp shards remained. Before me, on a lavishly decorated engagement stage, adorned with thousands of white roses and blue hydrangeas, stood my mother, Eleanor Vance, a woman of power and undeniable allure at 50. Her hand clasped tightly in Mike Sterling's, the man who was once my husband. They beamed, radiating a dazzling happiness as if there wasn't a single blemish on their love story. Mike, with his neatly trimmed chestnut hair and warm smile, looked like a Greek god in his impeccably tailored Armani suit. My mother, stunning in a pristine white lace gown, her skin flawlessly smooth thanks to expensive cosmetic procedures and strict beauty regimes. They were, in everyone's eyes, the perfect couple. My mother, the queen of the New York art world, and Mike, the talented architect, a rising star. I raised the gold-plated microphone to my lips, my voice clear and sweet, honed by countless sleepless nights. It resonated throughout the grand room, yet held layers of hidden meaning that only I understood. Distinguished guests, I am Annabell Thompson. Today I have the distinct honor of officiating this momentous occasion, a day when love blossoms and bears fruit. I offered a faint smile. My eyes, sharp as daggers, swept across my mother's radiant face, then slowly moved to Mike's, which seemed slightly tense. He smiled back, a familiar smile that once made my heart race, but now only evoked pure revulsion. I paused, allowing my words to sink into every corner of the room, letting their curiosity swell to its peak. To reach this moment, I must say, has been quite a journey, especially for me. You see, to stand here today, I've had to live for 2 long years in the shadows of betrayal, deceit, and a shocking secret that none of you could ever imagine. I offered another slight smile, one that didn't reach my eyes, as if carved from ice. For those 2 years, I was a ghost, a woman betrayed who had to remain silent. I witnessed, I endured, and I waited. But today, that shadow will vanish, and I will tell you everything. The air in the ballroom thickened, whispers erupted, then slowly died down. Hundreds of eyes were fixed on me, curiosity and apprehension spreading like an electric current. Mike subtly knitted his brows, a sign of extreme anxiety that only I could recognize. My mother, although still smiling, had a fleeting look of unease in her eyes, darting a quick glance at Mike, as if seeking reassurance. I knew then, the game had officially begun. The unraveling of a picture-perfect marriage. Memories flooded back, beautiful yet agonizing, like an old film replaying in my mind. I recalled the early days of my marriage to Mike. We had met at an art exhibition in Boston, where I worked for a small gallery, and he was seeking inspiration for a new project. He was everything to me, The ideal husband, always knowing how to make me laugh, always doting, attentive to every small detail. Mike, with his slightly artistic chestnut hair and warm smile, was every girl's dream man. A talented architect, he was constantly busy with projects across New England, but he never failed to make time for me. Our cozy home in the peaceful Connecticut suburbs near Stamford was filled with laughter, candlelit dinners, and a comforting warmth. I remembered Mike making me coffee in the mornings, our evening strolls through the nearby park, or how he'd gently hold me close at night whispering sweet nothings. I genuinely believed I was the luckiest woman in the world, having found a husband who was both brilliant and utterly devoted. My mother, Eleanor Vance, was a frequent visitor. A prominent figure in New York's high society, she owned a prestigious chain of art galleries spanning Manhattan, from Chelsea to the Upper East Side. She was always so proud of me, her only daughter, and was particularly fond of my husband. At least, that's what I thought. Mother Eleanor was a strong-willed, elegant, and incredibly empathetic woman. She often called Mike to check on his work, his health, and even remembered his favorite dishes. I felt a warmth seeing my mother and husband get along so well, partly because I wanted her to have someone to share her life with after my father's passing a few years prior. I recalled times Mother Eleanor would personally cook Mike's favorite meals, like her special family recipe for barbecue ribs or a crispy apple pie with cinnamon. She'd bring them to his office, meticulously arrange his desk, or buy him expensive gifts meant only for him. The latest Rolex, bespoke suits from Savile Row. I even joked to Mike once, "Mom probably spoils you more than she does me." He'd wrap me in a hug, laugh heartily, and say no one could ever replace my place in his heart. His voice sounded so sincere that I never once suspected. But then, the first cracks began to appear. So minuscule, I barely noticed. I'd occasionally witness little furtive touches between my mother and Mike. One time, I walked into the living room to find my mother gently smoothing out Mike's tie, her fingers lingering on his chest for a moment longer than necessary. Their eyes met, a fleeting, knowing glance that I dismissed, thinking it was just a mother-in-law's affection for her son-in-law. A pang of jealousy might have flickered, but I quickly dismissed it. Another time, at a charity gala in the Hamptons, I saw Mike and my mother standing alone on the balcony, overlooking the ocean, Mike's hand gently resting on her waist as she turned to point out a constellation. They whispered something, and Mother Eleanor's smile was brighter than I had ever seen it directed at me. I simply assumed they were sharing a joke or that Mike was being chivalrous. A pang of jealousy might have flickered, but I quickly dismissed it. One afternoon, I returned home from a business trip earlier than expected. As I opened the door, I found my mother and Mike sitting intimately close on the leather sofa in the living room, Mike's hand clasped tightly in my mother's, both leaning over a small notebook. They were murmuring to each other, their tones surprisingly intimate. The air around them seemed to thicken, charged with a strange energy, a connection I couldn't quite name. When I appeared, they startled, quickly releasing hands. My mother hastily tucked away the notebook and explained they were discussing renovations for the house, getting it ready for my return. Mike quickly chimed in, saying he was planning a new home office for me, a surprise he knew I'd love. I believed them without a shred of doubt. In fact, I felt a surge of warmth, touched that my mother and husband were secretly preparing something special for me. Love can be blind like that. It makes you overlook the smallest signs, the tiny fissures beginning to appear in the wall of happiness I had so carefully constructed. The creeping sense of unease began to haunt me, like a dark cloud hovering over a bright summer day. No matter how hard I tried to shake it off, it clung to me stubbornly. My intuition screamed that something was wrong. Mike became noticeably distant, no longer giving me spontaneous hugs from behind or whispering sweet nothings in the morning. He spoke less and was frequently away from home with increasingly flimsy excuses. I have an urgent project in San Francisco, or I have a late meeting with a client in Manhattan's financial district. His phone was glued to his hand, screen always facing down whenever I approached, as if it held forbidden secrets. My mother, Eleanor, also started exhibiting strange behaviors. She was constantly busy in inexplicable ways. Late-night phone calls dragged on, and I'd only catch muffled whispers, fragmented sentences. One night, I happened to walk past my mother's study late, the desk lamp casting a warm glow onto the hallway. I heard her speaking softly into her phone, her voice filled with a desperate longing, a tone I had never heard from her before. I miss you every single second. Do you know how much I crave to see you? Then a drawn-out sigh. Don't worry, Anna will never know. We have to be more careful. I'll arrange for us to have a private night at your old apartment. Don't let anyone suspect a thing. Each time I asked, she'd explain she was discussing business with European art partners, blaming the time difference. I began to feel like an outsider in my own home. A chilling suspicion started to gnaw at my mind. I remembered one evening when I decided to investigate. I was about to make coffee for Mike, who was engrossed in his iPad. Suddenly, his phone vibrated. I glanced over and saw a message from an unsaved number, just a string of digits from Connecticut, but the content was brief and extremely suggestive. Miss you, darling. See you later. My heart pounded, my throat tightened, but Mike quickly snatched his phone. He looked at me, a flicker of discomfort on his face, but quickly composed himself. Oh, that's just troublesome David, a colleague of mine. He's always messing around. He gave a forced laugh, then swiftly tucked his phone into his pocket. I almost believed him, partly because I was so terrified of the truth, and partly because I didn't want to suspect my husband of such a thing. A feeling of loneliness and alienation began to seep into every corner of my soul. I often lay awake at night, watching Mike sleeping beside me, yet feeling him further away than ever. Once, I deliberately woke up in the middle of the night just to hear Mike whispering on the phone in his study. I love you. I can't wait until tomorrow. I want to hold you right now. Feel your warmth, Eleanor. Don't worry, everything is under control. Anna doesn't suspect a thing. Then he quickly hung up when he heard me stir. I asked him who he was talking to, and Mike simply replied, it was an important call with a client in Japan. I tried to convince myself it was just work pressure, that I was overthinking, but the feeling of an invisible cord pulling me further away from this marriage became increasingly clear. The climax of my suspicion arrived on a rainy October afternoon when the maple leaves in Connecticut had turned a fiery red. My intuition told me I couldn't continue living in this blindness any longer. I decided to find out the truth for myself. I remembered lying to Mike that I was going to meet friends in Hartford, but in reality, I rented a car and followed him from his office. My heart hammered in my chest, the heavy raindrops drumming against the car window like a frantic warning. I followed Mike through winding roads, past quiet residential areas, until he stopped in front of a small, discreet boutique hotel in a secluded part of Westport. The Hideaway Inn. The name suddenly sounded so ironic in my ears. He entered the lobby and I held my breath, watching. About 5 minutes later, a yellow taxi pulled up directly in front of the entrance. Out stepped another familiar, haunting figure. It was my mother, Eleanor Vance, in a burgundy cashmere coat and elegant high heels. She hurried inside, completely unaware that a pair of eyes was watching her from a distance. The shock was like an electric current tearing through my entire body. I collapsed right there, my head hitting the steering wheel, hot tears mixed with the cold raindrops splashing against the car window. I couldn't believe my eyes, couldn't believe what I had just witnessed. My husband and my mother? They were together in a hotel? A surge of disgust and horror washed over me, making me want to vomit. I mustered every ounce of strength, trembling as I got out of the car. I walked straight to the room I had seen Mike and my mother enter, room 302. I stood there in the silent hallway with only the frantic pounding of my heart echoing in my ears. I could hear laughter and voices from inside, Mike's laughter, my mother's laughter, intertwining. They weren't ordinary joyful laughs, but intimate, tender sounds, chillingly so, as if they were lovers lost in their own world. How much I love you, Eleanor. I can't imagine life without you, Eleanor. Then my mother's seductive whisper, "You are my destiny, Mike. Anna will never understand our love, a love that transcends all boundaries." In excruciating pain, a betrayal beyond words pierced my heart like 1,000 knives. My world crumbled completely. The two people I trusted and loved the most had stabbed me, not just once, but twice. I remember backing away, trembling, and then fleeing. I didn't know where I was driving, only that I needed to escape that place, that horrifying truth. Darkness descended. Not the darkness of night, but the darkness of deceit, of betrayal, swallowing my life whole. 2 years of hell and the master plan. I still can't believe I survived those 2 years of hell. Every day was an internal battle, a performance I had to maintain, a relentless mental torture. After that fateful night at the Hideaway Inn, I decided to keep silent. Not because I was weak, or because I still loved Mike, or out of respect for my mother, but for an entirely different reason. The pain was too immense for me to speak immediately, but at the same time it ignited a smoldering fire of revenge within me. A cold, quiet flame burning silently, waiting for the perfect moment to erupt and consume everything. I needed time to process, to meticulously craft a flawless plan of retribution, to make them pay for what they had done, not just with their honor, but with everything they held dear. Life outwardly continued, but I lived like a robot. I still went to work at the art gallery in Soho, still met friends, still smiled and chatted, but inside I was an empty void. I remembered the strained family dinners at my mother's sprawling mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, where I had to face my two betrayers. I sat there watching my mother and Mike talk and laugh as if nothing was amiss, while my heart bled. I had to force those fake smiles to my lips as I witnessed my mother and Mike secretly exchanging glances, subtle gestures of affection. Once, I saw my mother gently place her hand on Mike's thigh under the table during a family dinner. Mike flinched slightly, but quickly took her hand and squeezed it softly. A tender squeeze that only I noticed. "You're doing great, darling," my mother whispered to Mike, just loud enough for them and me to hear. "Anna doesn't suspect a thing." A moment of utterly revolting intimacy, and I had to stifle the sob in my throat, bracing myself from breaking down. Even more horrifying was how brazen they became, openly, believing I was oblivious. Mike frequently came home late, sometimes spending the night at clients' homes, but I knew exactly where he was. My mother would call me, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Darling, has Mike come home yet? He works so hard. Remember to take care of him." I had to suppress the urge to vomit upon hearing her lies, vowing that their day of reckoning would come soon. I meticulously collected evidence, every text message, every photograph, every audio recording, with the precision and stealth of a seasoned private investigator. I purchased advanced tracking software, discreetly installing it on Mike's phone one night while he slept soundly. I recorded their secret phone calls, backed up the affectionate messages they sent to each other. One text from Mike to my mother at 3 a.m. while I lay next to him. "Can't sleep, Eleanor. You consume my thoughts. Wish I could be with you forever." And my mother's reply, "I know, Mike. This feeling is insane, but I don't want it to end. Waiting for this weekend is torture." Every piece of evidence was a dagger in my heart, but also a brick in the wall of my vengeance. I discovered they had a secret apartment in a high-rise condominium in Lower Manhattan near Hudson Yards, where they frequently met. I had photos of them holding hands as they entered in the late afternoons, videos of them passionately kissing as they left the next morning. I even installed tiny spy cameras in that apartment, recording moments they believed were their most private. I had video footage of their intimate conversations, their embraces, their kisses, and even their muffled laughter echoing through the apartment. All of it was carefully stored on a private encrypted hard drive, awaiting the day it would see the light. Every day was a torment, but also a step closer to my liberation. I knew I couldn't just expose them then and there. I needed a retribution that was spectacular, unforgettable, one that would not only humiliate them, but also strip them of everything, their reputation, their careers, and all they had painstakingly built. The plan began to form clearly in my mind, step by step, like a chess game where I was the sole grandmaster. I decided to divorce Mike quietly, without a fuss. I remembered meeting him at a familiar cafe in Greenwich Village where we had our first dates. I suggested we part ways, citing, "We're just not compatible anymore, the feelings have faded, I want to find my own path." The looks on Mike's face, and later my mother's when I informed her, were clear relief, even undeniable joy. They thought they were finally free of a burden, that they could now openly pursue their relationship without fear. I maintained my role as the dutiful daughter to my mother and even played the part of good friends with Mike after the divorce. I frequently visited my mother in Manhattan, dining with her at the most exclusive restaurants. During our casual conversations, I'd bring up Mike, asking about his life. I even casually mentioned other women I heard Mike was dating. Of course, these stories were entirely fabricated by me to accelerate their timeline. I remembered looking directly into my mother's eyes, giving me my most innocent smile, and saying, "Mom, I think you and Mike are truly compatible. You share so many interests, and you understand each other so well. You should find someone new, and Mike is a good man. If he's not seeing anyone, why don't you two explore something?" My mother flinched, then quickly waved her hand, dismissing it as my silly talk, but I clearly saw the strange glow in her eyes. Mike reacted similarly when I casually mentioned to him that my mother was lonely, that she needed a man by her side, a man worthy of her stature. I knew then my innocent suggestions had sown the final seeds in their already corrupted ground, propelling them into the trap I had meticulously set. It was I who pushed them towards this engagement, step by step, like pieces on a chessboard where I was the one dictating every move. I quietly prepared my speech, compiling all the evidence I had gathered over the past 2 years. I practiced in front of the mirror, perfecting every word, every expression, every subtly ironic smile. I knew this would be the greatest performance of my life, and I would make no mistakes. The day of judgment, the feast of truth, and the shocking twist. And now, here I was, on the magnificent stage of the Plaza Hotel, the spotlight shining directly on me, the gold-plated microphone in my hand like a sharpened weapon. I looked down, hundreds of eyes fixed on me, full of anticipation and curiosity. I began my speech, my words outwardly flowery and meaningful, yet each phrase dripping with sarcasm and bitter irony. Marriage is the union of two souls, two people who truly love each other, overcoming all obstacles. And today, we have a very special couple, a couple who has overcome the barriers of moral decency to be together. I saw my mother and Mike's faces stiffen, their smiles slowly fading, replaced with looks of confusion and apprehension. They glanced at each other, then back at me, as if trying to gauge my intentions, a flicker of suspicion finally crossing Mike's eyes. I continued, my voice still sweet, but chillingly cold, each word like a bullet piercing their hearts. I have witnessed this love blossom, from secret glances, clandestine text messages, and even my own sleepless nights listening to them whisper through thin walls. From their furtive rendezvous at the Hideaway Inn where they shared their first illicit kisses, to their private apartment in Manhattan where they built their own secret nest, believing no one would ever discover them. The murmurs in the ballroom intensified, eyes of curiosity and suspicion now fixed on my mother and Mike. They visibly began to grow uneasy. Mike cleared his throat, his face turning ashen, while my mother nervously twisted her engagement ring, beads of sweat appearing on her forehead. I didn't give them a chance to react or interrupt. I held up the small black USB drive in my hand, a tiny object containing devastating power. I plugged it into the projector, which I had secretly arranged with the help of a trusted friend known only to me and them. To prove this magnificent love, I have a few small pieces of evidence, a special gift for the bride and groom on their momentous day. I believe you will be quite surprised by what you're about to witness. The large screen behind me suddenly flared to life, displaying every pixel with blinding clarity. The first image to appear was a text message exchange between Mike and my mother. I miss you, Eleanor. I want to be with you right now. I wish we could make our love public. I miss you too, Mike. Meet me at the Hideaway Inn, room 302, 7 p.m. tonight. Just make sure Anna doesn't suspect anything, my love. Everything must be perfect until we no longer have to hide. The murmurs in the ballroom ceased completely, replaced with a deadly silence, broken only by gasps and horrified intakes of breath. Then came the photographs. Not just one or two, but a whole series, crystal clear and undeniably damning. Photos secretly taken of Mike and my mother holding hands on the street, passionately kissing as they entered their secret apartment in Manhattan. There were even pictures of them having intimate candlelit dinners, my mother leaning her head on Mike's shoulder, looking like a pair of devoted lovers. Some even showed them in their pajamas, sitting cozily on the sofa in that apartment, their faces radiating contentment and happiness. After the images, an audio recording began to play, amplified to fill the entire room, forcing everyone to hear. It was Mike and my mother's voices, clear and distinct, filled with affectionate words, whispered vows, and even certain sounds. I can't be without you, Eleanor. You are everything I want. Anna is just a faint shadow, a perfect facade until we're strong enough to face everything. Mike's voice echoed, cold and cruel. Then my mother's voice, full of tenderness, even a hint of smugness. You are my destiny, Mike. Anna will never understand our love, a love that transcends all boundaries. We were meant to be. And finally, the muffled sounds, clandestine noises that were undeniably intimate, reverberated through the hall, shattering the terrifying silence. My mother's and Mike's faces were as white as paper, their eyes wide with terror as they stared at me, utter panic etched onto every feature. They tried to speak, but their throats seemed to constrict, unable to utter a single sound. Hundreds of eyes in the ballroom were fixed on them, not with blessings, but with disgust, outrage, and abhorrence. The drama had reached its climax, and I was the one holding the script, the director of their very own tragedy. I looked directly into their eyes, devoid of any fear or pity. My voice rang out clear and resolute, like a final judgment. Mike Sterling, I began, my voice dropping, filled with contempt. You swore to love me forever. Before God and our families and friends, you promised to build a life, a future with me. But you betrayed that vow in the most cruelest way possible. You turned our marriage into a mockery, a mere cover for your abominable relationship with my mother. You took away my trust, my faith in love, and my self-respect. You used me to achieve your twisted desires. I turned to my mother, my gaze filled with deep disappointment and hatred, the pain of being betrayed by my own flesh and blood, even more profound than the pain from Mike. And Mother Eleanor, you swore to love and protect me, your only daughter. You were the woman I admired most, the role model I always wanted to emulate. You taught me about integrity, about compassion. But you chose to destroy your own daughter's happiness, trampling on the sacred bond of motherhood with a perverted, disgusting love that no one could ever imagine. You yourself tore apart the most sacred link between us. The ballroom erupted in a cacophony of shouts, accusations, fury, and disgust. Whispers of "unbelievable," "how horrible," "incest" surged through the air, growing into a roaring storm. My mother, Eleanor, unable to bear the shock, her eyes wide, collapsed to the floor, her pristine white engagement gown stained by her own ignominy. Mike stood frozen, his face ashen, his eyes vacant as he stared at me. All his power, status, and honor vanished in that instant, like a sandcastle swallowed by the tide. The guests, from powerful executives to renowned figures in the art world, were stunned and horrified. A few women had begun to sob openly from the sheer shock, while the men clenched their fists, their faces etched with outrage and whispers. The distant sirens of police and ambulance cars began to wail. Someone in the crowd must have called them. I gently placed the microphone back on its stand, without a sound. I offered a truly genuine smile, a smile of satisfaction and liberation that I'd waited 2 long years for. I turned and walked away, without a single regret or backward glance. My steps were steady, resolute, as if I was finally walking out of a prison that had held me captive for 2 long years. The chaos and uproar behind me gradually faded, unable to touch me anymore, like the final notes of a tragic symphony. I stepped out of the grand doors of the ballroom, taking a deep breath of the free New York air. The afternoon sun had turned golden, casting long shadows across the bustling streets, seemingly welcoming me. A feeling of lightness and serenity enveloped me, a peace I had longed for. Today, I didn't just bless their union. I also returned to them everything they had given me, bit by bit, with the highest interest. 2 years in the shadows had ended. I, Annabell Thompson, am finally free. This isn't an end, it's a new beginning for my life. I smiled, a real smile, hiding nothing anymore. My new life at last had truly begun. Behind me lay chaos, the shattered remnants of honor, of a twisted love, but before me was a wide-open sky, a future that I would forge myself, no longer bound or betrayed by anyone.